Picture this. Black-clad knights riding beneath the burning sun, their white crosses gleaming like divine fire. They weren't kings or empire builders, just warriors who healed and bled for something sacred. Before there were empires of gold, some men lived for mercy and mastery. They were the Knights Hospitallers. Their motto? For the faith and in the service of humanity. De vult, God wills it. Sounds peaceful, right? It wasn't. When the Black Mantles rode out, their enemies whispered, God help us, the Hospitallers are coming. So how did monks devoted to charity become the deadliest warriors of the Crusades? Let's uncover how the Knights Hospitaller mastered war and outclassed even the Knights Templar. The year was 1099. The Crusaders had just taken Jerusalem. Amid the chaos of blood and dust, a small group of monks ran a hospital near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They weren't warriors then, just brothers and nurses caring for wounded soldiers and pilgrims, anyone in need, Christian or not. They began as caregivers, but the roads of the Holy Land were anything but safe. Pilgrims were attacked, caravans burned, bandits prowled the hills. And mercy alone doesn't survive roads like that. As violence became the language of survival, the Hospitallers adapted. By the 1130s, they were more than healers and monks. They had evolved into an elite fighting order with a dual mission: protect and heal the pilgrims, defend the faith. That transformation made them the one order nobody could break. Their black mantles bore the white cross, a symbol of purity amidst darkness. And unlike most knights bound by family, land or lords, these men owed allegiance only to God and their Grand Master. They answered to the Pope himself, directly. Think of them as God's version of a special forces unit, except with fewer gadgets and more chainmail. They built fortified hospitals and posts across Europe, funded by donations from kings, nobles and commoners alike. Soon their wealth rivaled the Templars, but their reputation on the battlefield surpassed even that. Because while the Templars struck like thunder, the Hospitallers endured like iron. They didn't just win fights, they survived them. Now, what was the lifeblood of the Hospitaller Order? It was discipline. Their code, written after Gerard's death, was strict. Each brother lived under vows of poverty, chastity and obedience. They owned nothing, not even the sword they carried. Every piece of equipment belonged to the Order. Lose it in battle? You'd answer for it before your brothers. They prayed at dawn, trained through the day, and treated the sick at dusk. They ate in silence while scripture was read aloud, and when the call came for war, they rode out together as one living weapon. Imagine the most disciplined army you can think of, then give them the divine motivation and matching outfits. Unlike most knights who lived for glory and honour, the Hospitallers lived for duty. They charged only when ordered, they retreated only when commanded, and even then they did it in perfect formation. Every movement was a reflection of faith, every battle was a prayer in motion. This wasn't just devotion, this discipline is why they survived battles that shattered everyone else. Their structure was divided into three branches: the knights, who fought and performed some humanitarian roles, the sergeants, who supported and guarded while aiding the sick, and the chaplains or priests, who tended the spiritual and healing side. Together they formed an unbreakable system where every man had his role. Think of it as a medieval company, but instead of marketing and HR, it's swords, healing and salvation. Their hierarchy was both military and monastic. Orders came from the Grand Master, and disobedience was unthinkable. They drilled constantly: swordsmanship, lance practice, siege defence and horse control. Even while stationed in peaceful commanderies in Europe, training was mandatory. Because when your brothers are dying in the Holy Land, you don't get to skip leg day. Discipline kept them alive, but on the battlefield, it made them terrifying. While most medieval knights fought like sledgehammers, the Hospitallers fought like scalpels. They built their tactics on discipline, timing and coordination. Their cavalry charge wasn't a mob, it was mathematics. Rows of armoured riders advanced in silence until the trumpet sounded. Then, in perfect unison, they lowered lances and struck with terrifying precision. But here's what made them better than most. They mastered the balance between attack and defence. Where the Templars often led with aggression, the Hospitallers excelled at endurance. They could hold a line longer, fight outnumbered and keep formation even when surrounded. Think of it as the difference between a sprinter and a marathoner. The Templars hit fast, but the Hospitallers hit forever. They were also pioneers of combined arms tactics. Their infantry worked in tight coordination with their knights, anchoring defences and supporting cavalry charges. When terrain made horses useless, the Hospitallers dismounted and fought as heavy infantry, shields locked, pikes ready, swords drawn. At the siege of Ascalon in 1153, they stood shoulder to shoulder under a rain of arrows, holding the breach long enough for Crusader forces to take the city. At Montgisard, they fought alongside the Templars against Saladin. Their discipline saved Baldwin IV's army from annihilation. Even their enemies admired their endurance. Chroniclers wrote that when they were about to lose a battle, the Hospitallers would form a final circle, shield to shield, and fight to the last man. That's the medieval version of, we're not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with us. They were also tactical innovators. In sieges, they built forward hospitals right beyond the front lines, so wounded soldiers could be treated without leaving the field. It wasn't just compassion, it was strategic genius. A healed soldier was a returned fighter, and unlike most armies that disbanded between campaigns, the Hospitallers were always ready. They were a standing army, trained year-round, armed to the teeth, and spiritually unbreakable. Their discipline made them terrifying, their faith made them unstoppable, and their ability to combine both, that made them legends. Picture a warrior praying mid-charge, then skewering you right after the Amen. That's the level of focus we're talking about. But their real test was still coming, when entire empires tried to erase them. The Hospitallers didn't earn their reputation in training halls, they earned it in fire. After Jerusalem fell to Saladin in 1187, the Hospitallers became the backbone of every Crusader defence. They held out when others fled. They rebuilt what was lost, and when every other knightly order broke, the Black Mantles stayed. Their fortress at Margat became one of the most impregnable strongholds in the Levant, walls of iron and discipline that even Saladin's successors couldn't crack. Imagine trying to evict tenants who pay rent in sword swings and prayers. And when Acre fell in 1291, the last Crusader stronghold, the Templars defended one gate, the Hospitallers another. From Margat to Acre, they proved one thing: they never broke, no matter the siege. Eyewitnesses said their Grand Master, Jean de Villiers, fought until he was wounded in multiple places, carried away only when the walls collapsed on top of him. Even in retreat, their formation was organised, protecting civilians to the docks as fire rained down. That moment defined them. They weren't just warriors, they were protectors, and when the Crusader states fell, the Hospitallers didn't vanish, they moved. But it wasn't retreat, it was evolution. What they became next would make them a nightmare at sea. They shifted their entire operation to Cyprus, then to Rhodes in 1309, where they reinvented themselves as naval warriors. From battlefield medics to pirate hunters, that's quite the resume upgrade. The Mediterranean became their new arena. They built fleets of galleys, patrolled trade routes, and smashed Ottoman and Barbary pirate ships like it was divine pest control. Every sailor knight was trained in boarding tactics, naval artillery, and close quarters combat. They weren't just guarding hospitals anymore, they were running a floating fortress. The Order's Grand Master at Rhodes was both an admiral and a general. Their navy's efficiency made even the merchant kings of Venice and Genoa take note. And while other medieval armies took winters off, the Hospitallers trained year-round. Their sea drills were as intense as their land campaigns. They were the first military order to master both land and sea warfare on a strategic level. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of having an army and navy subscription plan. Premium version, obviously. From 1309 to 1522, Rhodes became the Hospitallers' stronghold, their home, hospital, and headquarters. And what a fortress it was. They transformed the island into one of the most advanced defensive systems of the Middle Ages. Towering bastions, moats carved into rock, and artillery so cleverly placed that invaders often fired blindly. Each regional branch of the order was assigned its own bastion to defend. French, Italian, German, English, and Spanish knights, each maintaining their own section, like miniature armies within the greater whole. When the Ottomans came, they found not chaos, but order. The first major siege came in 1480. Sultan Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople, sent a fleet of 160 ships and over 70,000 men to take Rhodes. The Hospitallers, roughly 600 knights and a few thousand locals. You can guess how that math worked out. The Hospitallers turned the island into a meat grinder. Every Ottoman assault broke against their walls. Their artillery coordination was so precise that siege towers were obliterated before they even touched stone. Imagine playing Capture the Flag while the other team has cannons, divine motivation, and an unshakable sense of spite. After months of brutal fighting, the Ottomans withdrew, one of the few times a Crusader force had ever thrown them back. But empires don't forget humiliation. Their greatest test came in 1522. This time Suleiman the Magnificent led the siege. Over 100,000 soldiers, countless cannons and one goal: crush the Hospitallers. The knights numbered fewer than 7,000. For 6 months they fought a hopeless defence. Streets became trenches, churches became hospitals, and still they held. When the walls finally fell, they didn't surrender. They negotiated evacuation with honour. Even Suleiman was impressed, granting them safe passage. When your enemy praises you after conquering you, you know you've done customer service right. That siege marked the end of their rule at Rhodes, but like before, they adapted. They sailed once more, and in 1530, Emperor Charles V granted them a new home, Malta. And if Rhodes was a fortress, Malta was a rock forged for vengeance. The move to Malta turned the Hospitallers from defenders into avengers. They spent decades transforming the island into a citadel of faith and firepower. Valletta's walls rose from limestone cliffs, bastions layered like armour plates. The order built hospitals, churches, armouries and shipyards, each designed with terrifying precision. By now the Hospitallers had become a fusion of monks, soldiers, engineers and doctors. Their fleets hunted Ottoman corsairs across the sea. Captured ships were repaired, reflagged and turned back to fight their former masters. It's the medieval version of recycling, except the material was enemy ships. Their medical expertise remained unmatched. Even wounded captives were treated. It wasn't kindness for kindness' sake, it was strategy. A living prisoner talks more than a dead one. And then came the moment that defined their legend, the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. The Ottomans returned, furious at the Hospitallers' raids. This time 200 ships and over 40,000 men landed to crush the island. Opposing them, 700 Hospitaller knights and about 8,000 local soldiers. That's it. The siege lasted 4 months. The defenders fought in shifts, sleeping in armour, praying between cannon volleys. Fort St. Elmo fell only after every man defending it died in place. The Grand Master, Jean Parisot de la Valette, coordinated every move like a chess player who refused to lose even his pawns. Imagine managing logistics, morale and cannon fire on 2 hours of sleep and a lifetime vow of chastity. That's discipline. By September, the Ottomans were spent. Their forces retreated in exhaustion, leaving behind tens of thousands of dead. Europe celebrated. The Hospitallers had done what entire kingdoms couldn't. They stopped the Ottoman Empire cold. Malta became the symbol of Christian resilience. The black mantle and white cross, once a mark of charity, now stood for military perfection. The Hospitallers had not only survived centuries of war, they had evolved with it. From swords to cannons, from horses to galleys, from hospitals to fortresses, they mastered it all. The ultimate career trajectory. Started as nurses, retired as naval warlords. The Order of St. John had proven again and again that their strength didn't come from numbers or weapons, it came from unity, discipline, and the unshakable belief that faith was worth fighting for. And that, more than anything, is why the Hospitallers weren't just good at fighting, they were born for it. By the time the smoke cleared over Malta, the Hospitallers had become living legends. Their victories were carved not only into stone walls, but into the memory of Europe itself. They began as healers in Jerusalem, yet by the 16th century they had become the shield of Christendom. From the Levant to the Aegean, their black banners carried one promise: where others faltered, they would stand. Their hospitals were the most advanced of their time. They practiced hygiene, quarantine, and structured patient care centuries before modern medicine existed. A wounded knight or peasant received the same treatment. Rank meant nothing before the cross. Imagine checking into a medieval hospital and realising that your nurse can also skewer a man in full armour. Talk about all-inclusive service. Even after the cannons fell silent, the Hospitallers remained. They adapted, empires fell around them, their mission didn't. Their modern descendants still run hospitals and humanitarian missions around the world, echoes of the same vow made 900 years ago. And that's the irony. The greatest fighters of the medieval age weren't born from conquest, but from compassion. Proof that sometimes the best warriors start as caregivers, with a side of holy vengeance. The Hospitallers outlasted the Templars, outdisciplined feudal armies, and outfought every empire that tried to crush them. Their story isn't just one of warfare, it's one of resilience, reinvention, and purpose. They fought not for wealth, not for fame, but for duty. And in doing so, they became the very thing every knight aspired to be: unbreakable. The Knights Hospitallers began with mercy, fought with precision, and endured with faith. Their story reminds us that true strength isn't in the sword, it's in what drives you to wield it. So, what do you think made the Hospitallers unstoppable? Their discipline, their faith, or something far darker beneath the armour? Let me know in the comments below.